This is WOBC Oberlin 91.5 FM, Oberlin College and Community Radio. This is Oberlin, the radio show about Oberlin, because I want to talk about Oberlin and hear what's going on in Oberlin and share with you what's going on in Oberlin. And it's sunny. That's just a thing that's going on in Oberlin today. The guest I have on, if I can hit the right mic, is Tom Geller, who from the beginning of this semester was the guy that, as I read one of his articles on Belt Mag, and I think that's the URL, I'm pulling it up, beltmag.com. It was about Oberlin and development in Oberlin and living in Oberlin and should Oberlin develop, and it didn't get into great technical detail about what that might take, but it described the help me out here, Tom, how would you say it? It described...
I think you covered it pretty well, actually.
Okay. As I read it, and I responded to it on my blog, oberlin.wordpress.com, it was the final push that got me in the mind to do a radio show like this. I had thought about it for years. I have a thing for radio, but just never quite felt that last push to get me over the hump. And I read the article and I responded and I talked to Tom, and he was good enough at the point of applying for the show to say, hey, I'll apply with you. And he was there that is, in the studio for the first show or two, and he just kind of stepped back, and I don't know if I steamrolled him. I don't get that sense that I steamrolled him, but he went off and was doing his thing, and we've talked off and on during the semester. But I thought, as my co-DJ, I would have you on, Tom, and we could talk a little bit about Oberlin, about what you do, about why Oberlin. You're coming from San Francisco, if I remember the article right.
Right.
Okay. So that's who and what we are. My name is Peter Cummings, and as I say, I do this show because while I live here, I don't work here, and that makes it harder than you might think to keep up on what's going on in town. So to plug the article again, and the online magazine, it's beltmag.com, and the article in particular is Welcome to Lower South Worthington. It was published in December of 2013, before the deepest of the deep freezes overwhelmed us all. Tom, you're a freelance writer, among other things. Is this the kind of article that you write most often, or is Beltmag one that you just contribute to every so often?
Well, it was an experiment for me, really, because mostly what I do is I write about technology. The most likely place that anyone at Oberlin would have seen my work is on lynda.com, which is an online training, a video online training company. I've done 10 courses for them and actually just recorded an 11th, which I can't talk about specifically, but it'll be out in the next few months. Belt Magazine was started by Anne Trubeck, who students might know from, I don't remember if it's the creative writing or the rhetoric department, but she's in one of the English departments, and she took a great initiative, I think, to start this online magazine about life in the Rust Belt. And because she lives in Cleveland and I live in the Cleveland area, a lot of the articles tend to focus on Cleveland, but they also include Detroit and Buffalo and Pittsburgh and other parts of the Rust Belt. But it was unusual for me, and I was glad to have the outlet. I wrote a second article for them, which wasn't as successful as that first one, but the first one really gave me a chance to kind of coalesce the things that I had noticed after moving here from San Francisco, and the feeling that I had that people here have a kind of pride in their lack of pride, I guess you could say. Right.
That came through pretty clearly in that first piece, and I think was what I reacted to most of all there. I certainly, and I went back and I read both your original and my response, and I read them backwards, so my response and your original, and I see where I would have a lot of work to be a freelance writer to make sure I was clearer in my writing, because it made much less sense until I went back and read yours first again. But the bottom line for me was that success as a community can be defined in a lot of different ways by the community. And I would encourage people to go read Tom's original piece to get a much better sense than I'll be able to give you sitting here right at the moment to see what he was saying. The photography is also very good, and I saw in some of the comments that people were surprised maybe by how good the photography was. Are you known as a photographer also, or is writing really your thing?
I'd like to say not yet.
Okay, sure.
I was into photography when I was a teenager, and I sort of set it aside when film started dying and, becoming more expensive, but digital really wasn't good enough for quite a while. And finally, digital is good enough where if you spend a reasonable amount of money, you can get good equipment. Mm-hmm. And so I just got back into photography over the last year or so.
And the sites around Oberlin are free. No cost there to, say, shoot First Church or some of the places downtown. The lighting in those pictures was really well captured.
It was kind of an experiment, which I recommend to anybody who's interested in photography. Go out at night if you have a camera that can do long exposures, and it was all like 30-second exposure shots. So the buildings, if there's a light in the window, the whole window glows and imbues it with a certain shimmering quality, I think.
Well, talk about how you got to Oberlin. It was 2009, is that right?
That's right. Well, I grew up in suburban New York, like many Oberlin students. I always point this out. Did you know that Oberlin College has more students from New York than from Ohio?
I did not know that specifically, no.
Yeah, and I think many of them are either from the city or from the suburbs, as I was. But I came here as a student in 1986, and I was here for 1 year, 86 to 87, as a composition student. Mm-hmm. And Oberlin just wasn't right for me. I really wanted to be out in the world, out in a larger world, I would say.
Okay.
And I always relate this story that I was walking up Professor Street outside of Rice and King Hall, and I was talking to a friend, and I said, when summer camp is over, I'm going to do so. And then I realized, this isn't summer camp. This is supposed to be my adult life. But Oberlin, as you know, can feel very much like summer camp.
Sure. Because
of that closed community feeling, especially if you're a student and don't get off campus very much. So I transferred to Cincinnati, dropped out, went back, finished in Cincinnati, was overseas briefly, and then moved to San Francisco in 1992, more or less. Then in 2008, I was facing with my landlord had to sell the building for various reasons. He was losing his job and so forth. And the way that housing works in San Francisco, I knew I was going to lose the apartment anyway. So we made a deal. I got out early so that he could sell the building for more money. Again, more San Francisco politics. And I thought, well, where is it exactly that I want to live? I was already kind of tired of San Francisco, which is a lot of fun. But, after 17 years, you've tried all the neighborhood sushi places. And
17 years is a lifetime in any community.
It is a very long time, yeah. Now, I'm sorry, you moved back here? Or?
Right. My own story is that I grew up here. I went to school in Iowa in 1990, graduated in 94, and 5 years ago, it will be 5 years in August, moved here.
Yeah. So to continue my story, I looked around San Francisco thinking, is there some place that I want to live here and that I could afford? And the answer was not really and definitely not to those two questions respectively. And I thought, well, where do I want to live? And I considered Albany, which, is convenient to several cities, Boston and New York, and it's cheap and so forth. And my mind just kept coming back to Oberlin. I had spent the summer of 95 here. I kept coming back to visit, and the more I thought about it, the more I sort of started dreaming about Oberlin. And it's funny because you don't think about this, but for the 6 months or so between when I lost my apartment and actually arrived in Oberlin, it really did seem like a paradise. In Yiddish they'd call it a goldene Medina, an ideal place. And as my mother, who's an atheist, said, it's a little slice of heaven.
Oberlin.
Yeah, Oberlin.
A little slice of heaven.
When she came to visit. And her being an atheist, it takes her a lot to make her say that. But I did come back, and it's been pretty good. I bought a house after about 6 months here, and it's a great place for me.
Well, what's the change? In 1986, you were a freshman at the conservatory. In 1986, I was a freshman at Oberlin High School. So as you're walking around, that was me speeding past on my bike, carrying my French horn on the bike rack, and probably narrowly missing you a couple of times. I
probably didn't even notice I was an emo kid.
Okay. What's the difference between that person and the person? What would it be? Not 20 years later, but ish.
Yeah, 25.
That decides to move back. Is it the having gotten out into the rest of the world and wishing, maybe I had stayed in Oberlin, or was it all well and good that you had gone and done those other things and then had the perspective to be able to come here and appreciate it in a different way?
I think the big difference is mobility. At the time, I didn't have a car, and I think that when you're in Oberlin when you're in Oberlin permanently, you really need to get out every once in a while. I need to get out every once in a while. Oberlin has enough to live, but one needs, or at least I should say I need some variation from time to time. So I travel a fair amount, and actually Oberlin is a great place to be for that. I wish there were more airlines flying out of Cleveland and more direct flights to places like San Francisco, but, what are you going to do?
We're not pointing at United, are we? Having closed their hub in Cleveland?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, good call. I usually end up taking Southwest, the stopover in Midway, but yeah.
Midway is not a bad airport. It's an awful airport.
What's wrong with Midway?
It's midway between broken down and barely working the last time I was there. That's been a long time ago.
Well, I'll be honest. I love Midway because my stopover is usually an hour and a half, which is just enough time to go to the Potbelly sandwich shop, where all of the wings meet, and that's all I need.
And then you come back to Oberlin, and now as an adult, having finished summer camp and gotten your home here, we bumped into each other at a meeting for the Oberlin project, and I'm going to fail on the dates, but I think a couple of years ago it was held over at the Community Services Building, and so what I could tell right away was that for all that you were new to the town, 3-4 years at that point, you felt that real connection. You were very much wanting to be involved. How do you express your involvement with Oberlin? What are you involved in?
I'm involved with less now than when I first moved here, admittedly. And it's funny because I was facing the same thing that all of the seniors at the college are going to be facing in a month or so, which is if you're going to, and I assume most of them are going to leave Oberlin. That's the way it happens. And many of them will be going to new places and trying to figure out how are they going to establish themselves. And there are several ways to do that. And in Oberlin, the good thing about Oberlin is that you can really kind of understand the town fairly quickly because of its size, or at least you can understand some of its important points. You go to a city council meeting and you spend a little bit of time in City Hall and you get a pretty good idea of who runs the city and how it works. Try doing that in New York or San Francisco or Chicago. You just can't do it. So I actually took a shortcut, which is sort of similar to your radio program, which is I started something called In Oberlin, which comprised a radio show and a weekly calendar. And I basically took the college's calendar and combined it with events that I found in town. For example, on signs hanging up outside of the FEV or in the library or whatever, things that don't actually get into the college calendar. And I printed up a sheet and I hung that around town. And I did that for about 6 months. And by the time those 6 months were up, I had a really good sense of first of all, who the merchants were, because I'd stop in their stores and hang up the signs and I'd talk with them and so forth.
Sure.
But also who was doing what. And I think that would be my advice, not that you asked, for any seniors who are moving away, which is to find a project that sort of forces you to integrate yourself with whatever community you end up in.
And yet you say that you're less active that way at this point than you were a few years ago. Did you go to a few city council meetings?
I still go to city council meetings, more for for entertainment than anything else. Not that it's a big circus or anything like that,
right.
but it's fun to me to have a sense of things as they move through the digestive tract that is local government.
And so to you, because I think it might be different for you than it would be for someone else, I don't know, who grew up here, or just for anybody else, what is it that is going on at the city level that interests you right now, or has in the past?
I haven't been for a few months, but, well, for example, the reconstruction that's happening at the intersection of 511 and 58, that is Lorraine and Main Streets, that took a few months of city council mentions and so forth. And so when it came along, I kind of was looking forward to it and understood why it was happening and what was going to happen, as opposed to simply waking up one morning and saying, oh, I can't get to the campus very easily because there's all these trucks there. I don't know, it kind of, right or wrong, gives me a sense of ownership, I guess, in my mind for the town.
That you understand it, that you saw it coming, that you know what's going on and can have an informed conversation about it.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that I'm a little bit more informed every day, doing this kind of thing and otherwise. So city council, you say, did you ever serve on a board or get involved with any other committees, community pieces here in town?
No, I didn't, and there have been several opportunities to do so, and I'm occasionally someone will ask me, and I am getting involved in something that's related to the Oberlin project. Actually, not the Oberlin project, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. Another sort of non-governmental organization thing. The reason that I don't is because I travel so much. You know, I couldn't be on city council because I'll be gone for a month at a time, or a week out of every month, which could be the meeting night. Okay. This is WOBC, Oberlin 91.5 FM, Oberlin College and Community Radio, and that squeak is the chair that I'm sitting in. My guest is Tom Geller, my co-DJ as we started this semester on Oberlin. We had read some stuff online, give me a little nudge to decide that I would sign up to do the radio show, and he put his name down there too. I'm looking right now at seeing over the summer what comes along for radio programming opportunities. I think I'll try and keep going there. I've also got a draft Kickstarter project for some podcast efforts to do this off air and online, just to keep things going when the station is down. You'll see it if you follow me on Twitter at ohoberlin, OHOBERLIN. And, of course, there's the blog site, oberlin.wordpress.com. It's just something that I feel like I can contribute back to the community. I can't maybe do some other things, but I can do this, and it's fun. So I'm looking for ways to make sure that can continue. Tom is a writer, and as something, I'm an editor for a group of weekly newspapers in the area, but just being familiar with writers in general, they look for a surrounding, a set of circumstances that works well for their thought process. Oberlin is that place for you? Oberlin is so good for me for that. I need a certain amount of, I need the illusion of sociability. If I sit at home and work, I feel after a very short time like I'm pathetic in some way, that I haven't left the house and that I don't have a life. Whereas if I go to Slow Train or Mudd Library or one of the other college libraries or Wilder Hall or anywhere that I have the option to go, people are walking by, I can get up and walk around. And even if I'm not actually talking to anyone, again, I have that illusion of sociability. And each of those locations has everything that a freelancer like me needs. My computer is the only actual equipment that I need, but there's water and electricity and a place to sit. And I don't think that many students realize how valuable and hard to find those things are out in the world at large. Best bets are public libraries for anybody who wants to do a freelance career. But even there, often the internet isn't very good, or it has limits on it, or something like that. So would you say you spend more time here at home or on the road? For the year 2012, it was the only year of my life that I know of that I spent more days away from Oberlin than in Oberlin.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because at the beginning of 2012, I said, my resolution for this year is to travel as much as I can. And that's exactly what I did. Then in 2013, I said, I'll spend the summer in Oberlin. And it wasn't as magical as the first summer I spent in Oberlin, I have to admit. We'll see what this summer brings. I still haven't decided.
So last summer, now as I recall, that was a hot enough summer.
Yeah.
Oberlin, the summer, especially July and August weather, can be kind of oppressive. Growing up in New York and then being in San Francisco, you're on either coast where the ocean climate probably moderates things to some extent. Does it take some getting used to the weather, not just the size of the community? There, as a student, as an 18-year-old, there must be a lot of adjustments coming into Oberlin from New York City.
Well, I was from the suburbs, so it wasn't quite like New York City, but the funny thing is that one of the reasons I moved back to Oberlin is because I missed the weather. The weather here is fairly similar to what I grew up with, which is to say that there are seasons, which in San Francisco there's a wet season and a dry season, and it's all a little bit chilly and it varies tremendously as you go from neighborhood to neighborhood. And the problem with not having seasons as I understood them is after a while I kind of lost track of time passing, which messed with my psychology tremendously. So although my pipes froze this winter, and I actually hate the cold, and during the summer I get headaches when it's too hot and I don't have air conditioning and all this other stuff, I still feel much better here than in San Francisco.
Well, yeah, the pipes froze all over the place this winter. This one was one for the record books in terms of the cold. I spent a day. The pilot went out in our duplex and on our side, and it all got taken care of course, just fine. But in the interim, the kids stayed up on the second floor where the heat was rising, of course, and then they would send me downstairs to the first floor every so often. Hey, Dad, why don't you? And I, by the end of it, thought, well, no, why don't you? And we were all fine by the end. So you use this as a home base, as a touch and go point. What kind of traveling do you do?
I do a fair amount to California, partly to go back and visit friends in San Francisco, but also a lot of my work for lynda.com happens in their studios, which are in Southern California in Carpinteria. And I just got back from there, and Southern California is even worse than Northern California for not having seasons. So I couldn't see myself living there, but it's nice to get out once in a while.
It's just hot.
It's just kind of pretty.
And dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when you say southern, I've spent time in Southern California. El Centro, I believe, is the name of the community down in the valley where they do a lot of the vegetable farming.
Central Valley.
Yeah, Central Valley down there. And yeah, dry and mountains and dry and mountains for sure. That's where you spend most of your time going, is Southern California?
No, usually it's in Northern California.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, but California, generally.
Yeah, California, but I do go by New York and the East Coast. I haven't been there for a while, actually. I've been really trying to take a trip out there. I love upstate New York. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Well, they have the seasons as maybe nobody else would. The fall colors are legendary.
Yeah,
going up there. Do you have other family who come out to visit you here very often?
Not so much. Most of my family moved from the New York area down to the D.C. area, so they're 6 or 7 hours away, but not so much.
And do you go back out there?
I do go back out there from time to time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Technology writing. You could just base yourself out west, but you don't want to. You like the seasons. You like the community here. Technology, does that work for you to remotely do things? Is this a lifestyle you could have chosen and lived, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
I feel fortunate that the clients that I have now are pretty much the same clients that I had when I was in San Francisco. And they're paying the same amount as they did before. The big difference is that my expenses are about half as much. And it would be hard for me to start a career doing what I'm doing if I hadn't formed some of the relationships that I did while I was in San Francisco and Silicon Valley for so long. So I feel for people who are trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much in the same way. Now I'm trying to do more video production and so forth for some of my writing clients, and I would like to get more into video and presentation, being the face in front of the camera as well as in the editing room. And that's kind of hard to do away from Southern California, from LA and so forth. So I'm sort of experiencing the same thing that somebody trying to enter my field would experience if they're not in Silicon Valley or New York or one of the other centers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. We're going to take a break for a public service announcement. Cue up the right CD, and we'll be back in a moment.
Lorain County Rape Crisis, or LCRC, a program of the Nord Center, offers free and confidential support, advocacy, and information for survivors of sexual assault and rape. At LCRC, we aim to empower survivors of sexual assault and rape by asserting, first and foremost, it's never the survivor's fault.
Rape crisis-trained volunteers are always available to listen and offer support on the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline, which can be reached by calling 1-800-888-6161.
On the hotline, we connect survivors of sexual assault and rape and people who care about them to other free and confidential services of the Nord Center, such as individual counseling, support groups, and advocacy through legal proceedings.
These services are available to anyone, regardless of age, gender, race, sexual orientation, ability, religious affiliation, or other factors.
If you or someone you care about has experienced any kind of sexual assault, including sexual harassment, family sexual abuse, stranger sexual assault, or acquaintance rape, help is available through Lorain County Rape Crisis. Just call the hotline anytime at 1-800-888-6161.
All right, we are back on. This is Oberlin, the show about, Oberlin. My name is Peter Cummings, and my guest is Tom Geller, who also happens to be my co-DJ, as it says on the application sheet we filed back in January or February for a show on WOBC. Tom, talking about technology writing and the rest, how do you find social media being a useful or interruptive tool for you?
I have avoided a lot of it. There are people who have really worked it, in my field, of course, and I'm on a mailing list of other technology journalists, and some of them really work it, and they have thousands of followers. I've just never really tried to do that. I think part of the thing is that I get bored very easily, and I tend to change what I'm doing every few years. So
that's supposed to be the idea with social media. Hey, I'm changing again. Look at me now.
That's true. Maybe I should be more active on it, but
Live online, Tom. Come on.
Well, I first got online in 1984. And when I was a student at Oberlin, I'm going to walk down memory road a little bit. Some of the techie folks listening might be entertained by this. So I was a student 86 to 87, and the computers were in the basement, as they are now pretty much. We're in the basement of MUD in Houck Computing Center. And they were big VAX machines running on tape drives, and if you printed something out, it would come out on tractor feed paper that they'd give to you through a hole in the wall and stuff like that. It was all dumb terminals and such, but there was a very active social networking scene even then. There were, within the campus, and then slightly beyond the campus, there were 4 or 5 people who were computer science students who wrote up little bulletin boards and such. And we used them, just these ad hoc bulletin boards, to communicate with each other. And I maintained a file called Humor Text, where it was kind of an experiment in journalism where anyone could submit their funny story, and the idea was it was just a text file, and if there was something you wanted to add, you pasted it to the end and then closed the file, and anyone could read it. And it was an experiment that taught me a lot, because I very quickly discovered the need for editors like yourself. 1 or 2 very unfunny people started contributing a lot of very bad, I'm doing air quotes now, humor.
Right.
But, there has been social media of some kind for so long, I was a live journal person back when that was more popular in the early 2000s.
And you mentioning the VAX machines downstairs, I don't know how I came to be in possession of an account, but I as a high school student in town, I used the computer room down in the bottom of Mud and had email access. And I don't know that was maybe 86 literally, but sometime in my 4-year high school career, I spent a lot of time in the basement of Mud Library, being on the computers down there. And I don't know if more high school students than myself had, or people from the town were given access and had accounts. I just don't remember the process that would have given me that. I did take classes at the college as a high school student my senior year, and maybe that's what endowed me with the right to have an account of some kind. But it was a busy place down there in that computer
if I could
area.
jump in, I remember actually so all of the accounts started with a $.
Okay.
And student one started with an S. So I was STG and then 4 digits. And I won't tell you what the 4 digits were because this seems crazy now. They were the last 4 digits of my social security number.
Oh, sure, right.
And it was a public thing. You wanted to send something to me, you knew my social security number.
Right.
It was the last 4 digits.
Right.
But the townie ones were $ and then a name. And I remember $ Dyson was a local family named Dyson.
Oh yeah.
Do you know the Dysons?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I went to school with 2 of them, and actually worked with Mrs. Dyson at the Oberlin Inn.
Is she maybe... Well, she would have been older than I was because she had a daughter at the time who was, I think, 16 or 17, and she was also active in the computer. And
okay.
You might remember her, actually.
Well, you're going to put me on the spot, and I don't right away. That's not to say I couldn't come up with it, but Sam Dyson in particular was a student at the high school around the same time that I was, and he's gone on to great things in the Chicago area now, I believe. He's on Twitter.
Was the mother named Sammy?
Yes.
That was who she came. She was $ Dyson, I think.
All right.
Her daughter was probably, I guess, in her 30s then, or maybe 40s.
I couldn't tell you. Yep.
And the person running it is still around, Kevin Weidenbaum, who is $ Kevin. So, Kevin, if you're listening, you could perhaps chip in with some of the details.
Right. Anybody actually who wants to, the request line, or we'll just say the comment line, is 440-775-8139. I don't often do that, but we've got the occasion and the reason, so go ahead and give a call if maybe you had an account and you were a townie who went down and used the computers at Mud Library. So you're not very active on social media. I have seen you out there. Is this a flash in the pan kind of thing? Are we going beyond that? And I ask that kind of because as a writer, I find that social media prevents me from getting into long form thinking sometimes.
Yes.
And I won't say that I can't concentrate for 2 seconds or chew gum and walk, but it really has changed a lot of the mechanics of writing altogether, not just as a writer, but in terms of readership, what readers expect.
I think you're absolutely right. I was just having this conversation last night with somebody. This is somebody who tends to write really long on social media, and as a result, I never read her posts, quite honestly. On the one hand, you could fault social media for producing readers like me who can't stand looking at more than a paragraph or two of text. On the other hand, it's forcing people to narrow down their statements into 140 characters or less, or 1 paragraph or less, or whatever.
Ernest Hemingway maybe couldn't have tolerated social media.
You know the famous 6-word story of his that is probably apocryphal?
No.
It was a challenge to Ernest Hemingway. Again, this is probably apocryphal. Probably didn't happen. But to put together a story in 6 words, and this is a real downer. You should. His 6 words were, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn."
Wow.
And that's become something of a tradition to come up with 6-word stories. So, those of you who are listening, especially if you're English students, give it a try.
Yeah, I have a book that I got for Christmas a few years ago, really short stories, 50 words, 100 words, but they're supposed to be complete stories, and it was like reading a Facebook post, now that I think about it. I didn't appreciate it at the time for what it was.
I really like a lot of social media and some of the newer developments, video, for example, that have created entirely new genres that didn't exist before. One that I watch that... I'm really immature, so we have to get that out of the way right now. One that I watch that's not very well known, except in its own little circle is called YouTube poop. And if you just do a search for YTP, and it's basically people remixing things like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and My Little Pony and such, so that they're utterly ridiculous.
Yes.
But that wouldn't have existed before the sort of sense of social media, because it's not only that people produce videos, it's that they put them out and then the interplay between them. One person creates a video that's based on another person's video, and there's commenting back and forth.
We're one mass consciousness, and we're only just realizing it as a human race, that now that we're all connected online. We'll maybe start to see some of those videos with the big parade, I believe, is next week, and that's always a popular time for photos and videos here in town.
Yeah.
Get out there for that big parade. Ride the floats.
Next weekend, right?
Next weekend, the 3rd. Yep.
It's such a busy time of year. There were 3 or 4 things going on. There was Tappan Square doing Run for Life. There was Park Street with the WOBC party. There's something at the Cat tonight. There's, I think, Drag Ball is tonight, and it's crazy.
Look, you haven't done the show or the calendar for years, but look at how much you know about what's going on around town. That's great. Do you ever miss doing the show? Do you ever miss being active, creating those calendars that way?
Sometimes, but the difference between, I've heard somebody say the difference between work and play is, the only difference is that you're obliged to work. And when I was doing that, I was obliged to keep up with things. And so it became work, and now I can follow things just as a matter of play.
Which makes it easier, actually, if you think about it. You're not stressed about doing it, so it's easier just to keep things in mind. Sitting here in this chair behind this mic it feels more like play for me, or just ease, coming from a work week with deadlines and other things. So you had mentioned the calendar when we talked back this last winter, and even at that point I thought I just don't. It wasn't going to be something that was going to be part of what I was going to be able to do. And then on the other side of it, even the stuff that I have been able to do, the phones gave me difficulty a few weeks ago when I tried it, and it's just the equipment up here is fun. It's a lot of laughs to be able to use and have people on just for fun chats. Next week is going to be City Manager Eric Norenberg, which probably isn't going to be laughs in the same way. We're going to be talking about the May 6th and the income tax that's going to appear there for Oberlin. If you want to check it out online, cityofoberlin.com, I believe, is the city's URL, and they have an FAQ online there that will run down some of the basics of what's going on. I'm looking for online comments at my Twitter account, and I have a Facebook group that is welcome to comment or ask questions, and we'll try and take calls too that day. We'll try and hit a number of different avenues for input and feedback to make sure that Eric explains everything to everybody's satisfaction, or maybe not, because some people just might object to it, and that's fine too. That's why it's a vote and a democracy. So as I go off down the tangent road, as you're in town now, and you're not maybe going to as many city council meetings, what do you find yourself doing, Tom, in town? Do you stay up in your place writing when you're in town now, or is it, now that the weather's breaking, going out and just being outside, Tappan Square? Where do you find yourself being involved, and what do you find yourself doing when you are in town?
Well, I first have to acknowledge that I'm very fortunate to have the kind of work that allows me to basically get up in the morning and say, well, where do I want to sit today? And I try to take full advantage of that by moving from place to place. During the colder months, I tend to go to Mud and Slow Train, and sometimes the public library. With the weather getting nicer, though, I love sitting on the porch of Wilder. The one problem with the porch of Wilder is that there are no power outlets.
Oh, sure.
And during the summer, after it closes, of course, there's no place to go to the bathroom, so you can only be there for so long. The public library, many people don't know this, but if you go to the back, they actually have a very nice patio as well.
It is nice. I have gone there. And a couple of summers ago, I stumbled over the fact that I didn't even have to get inside to join their Wi-Fi. I was riding past on my bike and just wanted to check something real quick and jumped on and jumped off, and there it was.
You know, if I could jump in, I notice it is the bottom of the hour.
It is the bottom of the hour. Thank you, Tom. This is WOBC Oberlin, 91.5 FM, Oberlin College and Community Radio. This is Oberlin, the show that I do so that Tom can remind me that I have to do that station ID. Thank you, Tom, for being here. Tom Geller, a freelance writer, and I guess I kind of just threw that term at you, and you're so many other things in terms of, well, I'm saying that you write about many different things, I guess. Is that what you would say your job title is as such?
It is such a relief for once in my life to be able to summarize what I do by just saying I'm a writer.
A writer.
Of course, people usually think that then the next thing is, oh, I'm working on a novel. It's like, I don't know anything about that. You know, I don't know anything about poetry or novels or any of the writing that people generally think of when they think of as a writer. But as I say, I've changed what I've done every few years, and very often it's been doing something that doesn't have a well-summarized title. But so I'm very happy to say I'm a writer.
You change every few years. Do you change enough that you have to go through a whole new learning curve, or does one thing seem to follow from what just came?
As I get older, I recognize the value of using things that I've learned before. My instinct is to want to do something completely different. It's just in my personality. Mm-hmm. But as I get older, I'm realizing that every time I do that, I start again at not only an entry-level salary, but a field where nobody knows me. Mm-hmm. So, for example, now that I'm going into video, well, my first client is one of the magazines I write for. They want to do some video for, as you say, social media, and so they know that I do a little bit of that, and it turns out to be a very good match.
So video and writing, what have you recently come from to doing what you're doing now?
Well, I've been doing freelance writing since 2006, so it's been a while now. Mm-hmm. Before that, I'm trying to think if I should go backwards or forwards.
Let's go both ways.
Okay. Going backwards, I was in real estate for about 3 years.
Oh, wow.
In San Francisco.
Prior to 2006?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so you avoided being in it during the crash.
I got out at just the right time, pretty much. Well,
congratulations.
Because it's easier to sort of understand. So I graduated from CCM, which is Cincinnati's conservatory, in 1991. And I did basically a job that doesn't really exist anymore, which is word processing and layout. Since everyone knows how to use Microsoft Word now, they don't hire some temp to do it, which is what I was the guy they hired.
Okay.
Get a call at 7:30 in the morning, and it was the temp agency saying, go to this office in downtown Oakland, and such. After that, I started doing some writing for technology publications, and that would have been mid-1990s. And that was in San Francisco, and it was right around when the boom was starting, the tech boom. I remember I was actually in the offices of Mac Week when Netscape announced their IPO, their initial public offering, which was sort of the first big salvo in venture capital and, the enormous run-up that ended with the crash in 2001.
No, this was the internet boom with the home delivery of groceries, right?
Oh, yeah, Webvan was the home delivery, and Cosmo and Pets.com and all these other places that are out of business now, basically. So I was doing journalism during some of that time, and then I said, you know what? All the interesting things are actually happening at the companies. So I started doing public relations. Then before the crash, but not long before the crash, I got into running a nonprofit. I became very concerned with the problem of spam, and this was in the 99, 2000. Mm-hmm. And so I started a nonprofit to try to combat that, and it was, as you can tell, ultimately unsuccessful.
Well, I mean, how can you fight bots by the hundreds of millions?
Yeah, I mean, what I tell people is we were, and this is true, we were up against organized crime.
Right.
And we were no match, essentially.
How many people did you have working for you? Were you the boss?
It was just me, and that was part of the problem. Was I didn't know how to build an organization. So there were plenty of volunteers spread here and there, but there wasn't really a cohesive organization. And I have nobody to fault but myself for that.
Maybe it's something you could go back to.
Well, this could be a very big discursion, but I don't know. Should we get into it? It's kind of a technical discussion about.
We'll touch on why you wouldn't go back.
Well, for me, it was kind of traumatic.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was this big battle that failed. But I am kind of encouraged at the possibilities of something that used to be called hash cash, where basically if you send a piece of email, you have to pay for it. It's just like the United States postal system. And when it was described in the late 90s, it was impractical, but it's actually become practical because of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now we're all paying a small amount to send email. And we're talking about pennies. Which doesn't bother me or you to send a single piece of email, but it stops cold anybody who's sending 100 million pieces of email.
Sure. Or maybe we'll all give up using email the same way that the U.S. Postal Service seems to struggle in the face of email, and we'll all just direct message each other on Twitter or Facebook. Of course,
that's also true. I tend to think that, well, right now, spam on such systems is handled kind of authoritatively. That is, Facebook has to put out... Facebook spends millions and millions, if not billions of dollars, probably millions, to combat spam. Twitter does. All of them do. And I tend to think that if they can offload that into a sender pays model, that they'll do exactly that. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in like 5 years.
At which point, then we all reconnect the phones on our wall, right, and start having the shared lines between houses and different things. I see this somehow coming full circle before it's all said and done.
I do still own a typewriter, and I have a landline, and I am, despite all of this, something of a Luddite, which is one of the reasons that I haven't gotten that deeply into social media. I'm kind of waiting for it to settle.
Right. And so, okay, that brought you up to about 2001. Between there and 2006?
I was kind of lost for about a year, and if I look at my income statement that the IRS sends, this is how much you filed as income each year, there's 1 year in there that it says 0.
Wow.
Yeah.
You made it through that year.
On credit cards, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. But then I got into real estate, and I, survived, but I wouldn't say I did well.
Is San Francisco a hard market to work in real estate?
It's kind of a closed market. A lot of things in San Francisco, you have to really be at the top of your game to succeed at. And if you're not, well, maybe you'll get by and maybe you won't. And so I didn't flourish there. There are people who truly flourish there, and good for them. But in real estate, I was never a hardcore salesperson. I was always more interested in the data around real estate. And so I gave I was a buyer's agent. I represented buyers. So I gave them terrific reports and was able to compare houses to houses. But I never really kind of closed the deal and faced their own demons in doing so. I think that's what the successful salespeople can do.
Okay. And of all these experiences, do any of them call to you because you're in a different place now? You're not going to go back to San Francisco and do those things, but what about Northeast Ohio as a place to get into real estate? Or basically you're very happy doing what you're doing, and now you're moving into the video production like you're saying, but 5 years, 10 years down the line, are you still in Oberlin?
That's a very good question. Oberlin is a really great home base for me for all the reasons we've discussed, with the one problem of it not having a very good airport hub. On the other hand, Southwest is reasonably cheap, and I can check my bags for free, so, it's not so bad. I honestly don't know whether I'll be here in 5 or 10 years. Well,
to the powers that be in Oberlin, tell them, what would keep a person, Tom Geller, here in Oberlin?
Oh, I don't think that the city of Oberlin can make changes. I mean, I think the city of Oberlin is great for what it is, and it's exactly what I want right now.
Describe that.
Good journalism there.
20 years of practice.
It's walkable, for one thing. There's very high quality food for its size, and I'm kind of a foodie. The benefits of having the campus here and of it being an open enough campus for me to use are tremendous. As I say, I can go in and work and be comfortable and so forth. The living is cheap. There's a lot of opportunity. If, for example, I wanted to get into, let's just say, farming or buying a larger plot of land, you can do that for an amount of money that you or I or somebody listening can ultimately pay, as opposed to getting a building lot in San Francisco, which is going to start at $400,000 for a 20th of an acre. So there's a lot to like in Oberlin.
What would not push you away, but what is lacking maybe that you could see in 5 or 10 years if something didn't change or improve? You would say, well, it is this great town, it's walkable, it's the cost of living is relatively low, but
I think the impetus for me leaving would not be Oberlin, it would be my own boredom and my own tendency toward boredom. The need for a new experience.
Okay. Well, at quarter till the hour now, this is WOBC Oberlin 91.5 FM Oberlin College and Community Radio. We are live with Tom Geller, my co-DJ, who a semester running around writing and jet setting to different places has landed in Oberlin long enough to be on the air with me today. I have to say that last week I tried for the first time pre-recording a show, and I brought it up and played it. I think the equipment up here probably hasn't changed since I had a show here in, I want to say, 93. How did you try to operate your show in terms of having guests up? Was the ability there to pre-record and play? What was your show to you, and how did you want the community to see that at the time?
I was pretty ambitious, I think, and I didn't record any of the shows. They didn't have a recording thing set up here, and I didn't take advantage of a lot of things that I could have taken advantage here, I think. But it opened with an opening song, and I read the events calendar, and I had at least, I think it was always one guest, but I tried to intersperse it with local songs, that is, or music by local people. Excuse me, and besides the conservatory, there is a local music scene that's just great.
My brothers are no longer part of it, for anybody who's listening. For years, they were parts of bands here in town in one form or another. But yeah, community and college both. And sometimes those overlap. I know that there were times anyway when community bands would show up at a college party and be able to play.
Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to a venue that not everybody knows about, actually. Three Door Studios. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
Okay. It's the house right next to what's where Beethoven's Bagels used to be. I forget what's there now. There's a dry cleaner.
There's a fitness place and then a martial arts studio.
Yeah. It's right beyond Vine Street as you head south on Main Street.
Okay.
So you'll pass, I think, the flower shop and another house, which is the Nature Conservancy, I think, the office of the Nature Conservancy. And then the next house there, which looks kind of, it looks like an artist's house. And it's run by some great people, including Matt Gallagher and James Peake.
Oh, yeah.
You know James Peake?
Oh, absolutely. My kids, he rides his bike or drives by all the time, and they do the art camp during the summer. Yeah, James. Yeah. We know James.
So for those who don't know, James Peake is, I think, the education director at FAVA.
Yeah.
And he's also involved in this thing. And basically, Matt Gallagher, who was an Oberlin student who stayed, he's a very active painter, Matt is, that is, and so he paints in this house, and James, as you might know, does origami.
I did not know that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. He throws something called the Folding Festival at FAVA every year. And he himself is, I use the term origami master, although that's not an official title. It's just, he is a master of origami. And they also have bands there, and they do cookouts in back, and they show movies in back, and so forth. So if you ever get the chance to go to something at Three Door Studios, do it. It's
but how would you know? How would you know what's going on there?
They're active on Facebook.
Okay.
I know that. I don't think they hang that many signs, although you might see a couple on campus now and then. So look for them on Facebook.
All right. And so there is this still vibrant community intellectually and active in the arts and other things that still calls to you. So 5-10 years, Oberlin maybe not. But even if you left, would Oberlin be a place that you would come back to?
I think so. I think that Oberlin is permanently in my memory and in my heart. Perhaps more so than people who grew up here in a way, because it was something that I chose as an adult. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I shouldn't say more so, but different from. I imagine that you have special memories of, say, the Arb or something else.
Right, and all the college parties that I missed there because I was 12. I didn't hear any of them going on ever. I just saw the charred logs afterwards as I was walking down Plum Creek, straight down the middle of it. Yeah, there was a great big pit, in fact, just behind the Morgan Street Reservoir. If you walked back and then down the hill and across a bridge, I kind of think that must have been where all the big parties happened at one point. And I haven't been down there in a year or 2 years.
There is sort of still an ad hoc pit back there. It's where you find the empty beer cans, and shame on you all for leaving them there, but...
Well, it was the empty beer cans, some of them that weren't empty. It was just a nice place as the Arb to grow up. Having lived right across the street, to be able to walk back, and there was nature, and then of course there was the aftermath of the party experience to also see. It is as close probably to growing up around a city experience, a big city experience, as I was going to get living in Oberlin. Ooh, what's a beer bottle? Ooh, what's...
well, be glad. If you grew up in San Francisco, it would have been, I recognize that crack pipe and that syringe.
Right. No, I had no idea of any of those growing up. The worst that I could say is probably... nearly breaking an arm riding a log down Plum Creek, but those were good times.
So you did actually walk down the middle of Plum Creek?
Well, I, with my best friend, we rode down after really heavy rain. The water was really high, and we rode down it on a log.
Wow.
And those are kids' stories that I don't think get told anymore, or even experienced to be told later in a small town. And I just know that with my two daughters, if they ever told me that they had done that, I would react probably much differently than my parents did when I told them. And I think I told them, I'll get a message later saying, yes, you did, or no, you didn't, and what did you do? But yeah, Oberlin was a really nice place as a small town to grow up. The word is unique as a place. Whether you grow up here or you come here, you find out that it is a unique place, and you get that with a wink and an elbow nudge when you're talking to different people. Do you ever wish that maybe you had stuck around and graduated from Oberlin instead of going down to Cincinnati?
First of all, I have to go back and just tell our listeners that Peter does look like Tom Sawyer. So,
okay.
Anyway, to answer your question, it wouldn't have been right for me. It really wouldn't have. I'm glad that I got out and did other things, and I'm glad I came back.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's all fair and well and good. We will have the city manager on next week, and we will talk about income tax and other things. I think that Oberlin, the city, may be looking for a voice, or maybe it has a voice, and I'm just looking for the voice that it has. But that's part of my desire in doing this show. And I found out this week, my dad called me and said that Wednesday morning at 9, and I wish I could remember the guy's name, Chuck Annabelle, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
He has a show on Wednesday morning at 9 along this same line, and I'll have to see if I can tune that in sometime, because I think that... I think sometimes, my impression anyway, is that the voice of the city of Oberlin is obscured. To me, anyway, I struggle to find where to hear that. And I've looked on Twitter. I've done searches to see who's posting what, and it's a lot of kids. It's a lot of kids posting on Twitter. A few weeks ago, they were all worried about the ACTs. And when you're on Facebook and you're searching, it's because it's grouped differently. You can't do that same kind of broadcast.
You're searching for the word Oberlin.
Well, on Facebook, I guess I'm not searching so much as just realizing that the people that I'm connected with are all mostly my age or older, maybe a couple who are in their 30s, and we're remembering Oberlin. We're not currently experiencing Oberlin in the same way that we did as a kid. I wasn't here in my 20s and 30s, so my brothers were, but I don't have that experience in that age frame. So I'm just trying to find where that voice is as an adult. when my parents were raising us, it was much different, I think. All the voices weren't scattered to the ether, and they were all just talking to each other. And hey, look, what are we doing? Oh, well, hey, come on over. We're having a barbecue. Some of it still happens, and maybe some of it doesn't, and change is change, and that's just what it is. So it was interesting, and we can probably bring this back full circle, to read your article on Belt Mag. It was an eye-opener for me because it made me want to think about it as a resident returning to the place where I grew up. Oh, well, am I someone who wouldn't be proud of it? Am I someone who wouldn't say, yeah, Oberlin is a great place to raise your children? Every city has its ups and downs. Every place that you might want to have a family has good things and bad things about it. But the phrase I used in mine was coming back to see if there was still some quoi left of Oberlin's je ne sais quoi that could rub off on my kids, and I think it's out there. I believe I still have one more PSA to do, and we will get to that now.
ObiJump is Oberlin's first competitive jump rope team, founded in the fall of 2008. The team consists of 20 3rd through 9th graders from Oberlin Public Schools and has competed at a local, state, and national level. Perhaps you've seen them at Finney Chapel or at Oberlin College's annual O Circus show. If you haven't had a chance to see what these kids can do, visit www.eteams.com/objump. That's www.eteamz.com/objump. These kids will blow you away as they fly flawlessly through synchronized routines and flip through double Dutch ropes. However, the team's ability to continue to compete and perform is largely determined by the generous contributions of our community members. We hope to grow this support as the team's increasing success leads to growing opportunities for international competition and demonstration. If you wish to make a contribution, please drop off any cash or checks made out to ObiJump to Jenny Menser at Prospect Elementary. This PSA has been brought to you by WOBC, Oberlin Community Freeform Radio.
All right, we are about ready to wrap it up here. The next DJ has entered the studio. And what's the book you're reading today?
Dandelion.
Dandelion. They ought to be out any time now. I had my oldest out when she was 4 picking dandelions with me. We made dandelion wine. That was awesome.
Good for you. I keep meaning to do that.
Yes, it's just not quite as remarkable as you might hope in terms of the taste. That might have been my own experience with it, but we picked gallons and gallons of dandelion heads, and that was fun just by itself, watching her run around trying to fill up the bags. And I think she's probably listening right now, so those were good times, Emma. This is WOBC Oberlin 91.5 FM, Oberlin College and Community Radio. Tom, thank you so much for coming up here today. It's been a great semester with you. Even if you haven't been here, you've been here, and that's if for no other reason than you provided push enough for me to say, yeah, I can do this. So here I am, and here you are, and I wish you all the best with your new projects as they come along. Thank you for reminding me about the Vax machines down there in the basement of mud. I think I'll probably throw that up in the Oberlin group on Facebook. You know you're from Oberlin if. I'll put that out there and see who might have experience with that. Next week is Eric Norenberg, Oberlin City Manager, and it may be the case, I'll have to find this out, that's the last show for the semester, but as I say, I've got a Kickstarter draft that I keep talking about, and honestly, the last thing that's holding me up is the idea of putting a video of myself on the page for the Kickstarter proposal, because I've so got the face for radio that I just can't imagine putting a video up there and having people say, yeah, I was right with you on the project until, and well, yeah. So
I repeat, Tom Sawyer.
Tom Sawyer. If you think about it like that, we'll all be fine. I'll see if I can work up a little sunburn in the next week or so just to accent the look there. But I think we're set to go. You need Input one. All right. Well, Input 1, here you go. Have a good week, Oberlin.